thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me.
My
Um,
pleasure.
okay. I was immediately, I fell in love with this novel when I read it. I read it in preparation to see the film.
I
And
appreciate
yeah,
that.
yeah, it was immediately, I was like, I really want to have this opportunity to speak to the author. I have so many questions because it's a topic that's very dear to my heart as well. Especially the vegan cannibal conundrum, as you call it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
hmm
Um, but to start off, how did you get the idea to make a young adult novel about cannibals?
Yeah. So this is my only young adult novel, by the way. Excuse me. I've written a middle grade novel, and I see myself, writing in the future more middle grade and also more adult. So this is kind of the outlier in my body of work for more than one reason. Um, but yeah, I had gone vegan in April of 2011. And then it was that summer. I think I'd watched Flight of the Conchords. Have you ever seen it?
I saw the music video that you linked.
Oh,
It's
yeah,
just
yeah,
this little
yeah.
clip that, yeah.
Yeah, they're really funny. And so there's this one song that's like a cannibal, like sea shanty. And so so there were a bunch of different sort of things coming together in my brain because I was thinking about how, every time we eat flesh, we're eating the body of someone who didn't want to die, like whether that's a cannibal in a fantasy story or, just somebody going to the supermarket to get their dinner for themselves and their family. So, and I'd been thinking about that because I had been doing some research for another novel that I still haven't still haven't written. This is going back a long time. And so I was researching what kind of meals specifically people would have been cooking for themselves and for their families back in 18th century Edinburgh. So I found this cookbook called Cookery and Pastry, and then when I saw that there was a heading that said flesh, I was like, ooh, So there was that, and then there was the Flight of the Conchords, and there was like a whole bunch of, it's always how it happens when you get an idea that feels viable. You're like, I can write this. Because at the same time, I started hearing Marin's voice in my head, and I was like, oh my gosh, like this will be a real challenge to make this girl monster sympathetic, you know. So that's how it started.
But so the genre of young adult was there straight away.
Yeah. And I think my publisher initially were trying to do sort of a cross marketing situation with both young adult and adult readers, and it found both readerships. But I think it's more at home, like solidly in young adult, because it is. I mean, the novel is solidly a coming of age story, so it makes sense.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, anybody who's ever felt like an outsider will relate to it. And
Absolutely, yeah. That was
yeah,
my hope. Yeah.
yeah, no, I definitely would have also gone a long way to help myself. And if I had read it at a younger stage.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, because I don't. It's really strange actually. Because the more you speak, I think you also mentioned this in one of your videos. To artists, anybody has had this feeling at some point, and you don't really realize this when you're in that situation yourself. You think I'm the only one, I'm the outsider, but we're all
Yes.
outsiders basically.
Yeah, because we're not encouraged. I mean, this is slowly changing in the culture, but we have not been encouraged to talk about these feelings, the things that make us feel like outsiders, like we don't belong. If we all compare notes, suddenly we have our people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the elements are quite fantastical, so you don't really go into the detail. I think at some point you mentioned how quick it takes them to eat their prey, let's say.
Yeah.
So that was also there from the beginning, or did you ever think about maybe going into more
Realistic territory.
realistic? Yeah.
Yeah, no, this was always meant to be a sort of inverted fairy tale. And because it is, it is absurd. I like writing absurd premises. That's my jam, So it's really interesting how Dave the took the story in a more realistic, direction. So there actually isn't anything supernatural happening in the movie, which I think is so interesting. I love that divergence. But yeah, the story as I conceived of it was always meant to be supernatural.
So yeah, they're different species. I think you call them, it's not ogre, it's something, it's ghouls, right?
Yeah, ghouls. Yeah.
Because yeah, the film does portray quite realistically, even though you do wonder how I think it says she eats her first babysitter at 3 years old. You wonder how a 3-year-old could incapacitate a babysitter. But that's just what I really, the by the book audiences. But it's your third novel, right?
Yeah, my third of 5 published novels. Yeah.
Okay. And were you ever thinking about getting any of the previous novels adapted into film, or?
Yeah, well, it's such a passive process because, you kind of you put the book out there and then you're, not really waiting because you're not really expecting that. I mean, this is kind of an extraordinary occurrence that someone comes to you and says, hi, I'm from a production company and I'm interested in adapting your work. The only other adaptation experience I've had so far is as a stage musical. My first novel, my debut novel, Mary Modern, which came out in 2007. That's about a scientist who clones her grandmother. And it's this, again, very quirky story about, this scientist living in her crumbling ancestral home, who decides to clone her grandmother thinking she's going to come out with a baby. And then it turns into this sort of family melodrama, like double love triangle. And so it was very fun to watch. I haven't seen the full, there hasn't been a full production yet, but getting to the stage, to see the stage reading, where the composer Keith Gordon sang all the songs, played and sang all the songs, that was such a thrill. It was like, definitely the adaptations of my 2 novels have been, the most exciting periods of my career, but like probably not for the reasons that people are thinking. It's just so exhilarating to see what another artist can do with the source material, and that they care enough about your characters to keep building out the world and seeing what other directions they might go. And they changed the ending. Martin Casella, the playwright, told me he might change the ending, and I was like, do it, because I wanted to see it. And if I could rewrite that novel, I would also go back and change the ending the way that Marty wrote it, because I was so happy with it.
And so you published Bones and All, or it was published in 2015, if I'm remembering correctly. And then really soon, I think Teresa got in touch with you about
Yeah, like a couple months later. I think it was 3 months later. Yeah. And I think you heard Teresa's story already, right? You interviewed her, right?
Yeah, for a few minutes at the red carpet.
Yeah. And so that's just, it's the experience that everyone wants to have, like whether or not you're a film producer, to just be so wrapped up in a book that you don't want to put it down, even to go to sleep, go to the bathroom, eat a meal, whatever. That's how like, oh wow, this book has really grabbed me. And so she got in touch with us that summer, and so the film has been in the works for almost as long as the book has been out.
And because I think you mentioned also in one of your videos that you wanted to be quite hands off, but how involved were you? Because you were in touch with David when he started writing, or were you in touch throughout the writing process? Did you read some of the early drafts?
No, I actually didn't read. So we had initial phone calls, and because he wanted to know, he kind of wanted to find the beating heart, what for me. And because he explained, his process is, he wants to preserve the soul of the story, but he knows he's going to have to break some bones. And, and structurally and, creatively, like that totally makes sense that it's a different medium. You have all of these other artists who have so like a deep, deep well of insight and imagination to draw from. And so it's, it is going to be it's going to be so much different from the source material. And so we kind of, had those long phone calls where I basically told him that what was the only thing that was important to me that I was looking for was that the vegan subtext was made a little more explicit, because it was way too subtle as I wrote it, and which is, of course, my regret in writing the book as I did. And so, and of course, he absolutely listened to me, and I have felt a deep sense of I feel so respected by everyone who has been involved in this production. Starting with Dave, because he really did listen to me, and I didn't have any specific ideas, so he just went off and started working on the script, and I know it went through many iterations, and so then I didn't actually read the script until 2 days before I went on set, which was at the very end of filming. It was like the last 2 days of filming I was there. And so I was up really late that night because I knew that it was coming. And I was like, oh, like, should I brew a pot of coffee? Because this is going to be like such a fun, like staying up late, like having this exhilarating experience. And I was up late. I can't remember if I brewed a pot of coffee, but I mean, I didn't need it because I was already so stimulated. And I was just like, oh, like on my laptop, like, oh, this is so fun, so much. So so it was fun to have it that fresh in my head, the script that fresh in my head as I was going out to Ohio.
Yeah, I was actually curious about the vegan element, because I felt it was more clear, like it was less subtextual in the film because of the slaughterhouse scenes.
Yeah.
And I was curious because I knew that it was like it came from your like, how to say, you were I think the most interested in this particular aspect. That's why I was curious to see whether it was your push that drove it.
No, so it was my kind of like, it was just like this. It wasn't like,
okay, sorry. No,
no, I didn't mean it like that. But it just in terms of like, I didn't suggest that slaughterhouse scene. All I said was that I want the subtext to be a little more explicit. Well, I didn't say a little more, I was like more explicit. And so he came up with all of that. And then I think that was partly the inspiration for Jake and Brad too, who are characters who don't appear in the novel, but who, also wish I could have written them, because they're very compelling characters, especially Jake. Michael Stuhlbarg, like everyone who hasn't seen the movie yet, you're watching this video, like you were in for such a treat. Oh my gosh. Wow. But yeah, that was also, that scene was intended to throw up that contrast between this horrible compulsion and someone who's doing it for kicks. And so Marin is deeply upset by that, because if she could, like, she's trying to, find some sort of a moral compass, even though it's impossible, because she cannot not do what she does. She's trying to find that, and then she sees someone, these people who are living, and they just don't care at all about human life or any other form of life, and so she's very deeply distressed by that. So all these changes, you're just getting back to the adaptation process. You can make some pretty substantive changes and still stay true to to the heart of the thing, and so that's why I always say that I feel that for all the changes that they've made, the film is still very much true to the book, I feel.
Yeah, it definitely felt like that to me as well.
Good. Yeah.
I was also curious about, because there's a lot of like the genders are changed a lot, but also perhaps the gender roles, because in the book, to me, Marin felt much more insecure, and in the movie she's more like in the scene where she gets to buy the train ticket, she's immediately, I want this. She's more confident. She still questions herself, but she's also older, but she has a foot in the world. Perhaps it's a German saying, but yeah. Whereas we see a softer side to Lee that perhaps the book doesn't really show. And I was wondering how you felt about that.
Yeah. So I think it's a relevant detail that, Marin is 16 in the novel and she's 18 in the film. And I think part of that too is that, because Dave having decided to switch the parental roles, um, it made sense. And I don't know if this was his, I haven't talked to him about this particular aspect, but, Marin's dad is, my impression of the character as Dave wrote him is that he is also trying to be as honorable as he possibly can be inside of this horrible situation. And so I think it makes sense that, he doesn't abandon her at 16, he abandons her at 18 because she's legal. And those 2 years do make a difference, I think, in most people's lives. I certainly was a lot more confident at 18 than I was at 16. And then, as for Lee, he's a much more interesting character in the film than the Lee that I wrote. And I love that. I love that they kept developing his character and making him more fragile, more conflicted, and perhaps bringing out that sense of self-loathing and the intensity. And he's so much more fun to watch than he was in my head as I was writing. And again, just always come back to, the magic of the adaptation process, is that I'd do a better job writing this novel if I were writing it now. But, these are the economic realities of being a novelist, in this or any century. You have to move on to the next story at some point. So, but it's lovely to see. I know I've already, to belabor the point, but it's so lovely to see all of these talented filmmakers, continuing to do work on top of my work to make these characters even more vivid and more, more emotionally complex. It feels really good to, get to watch these amazing actors, both do such a wonderful job of portraying my characters, or, sort of the next, in Lee's case, Marin still feels mostly mine, and Lee is more Dave's and Timothy's, I think. So, which, like I said, I love that though.
Yeah. And obviously we're two white women speaking, but the element of othering a non-white character is also quite interesting. One of my really early films in film school was about cannibalism, and my tutor immediately said, you cannot be colorblind casting this. And at the time I didn't really understand it, but there's also this element of cannibalism having been used as a racist scare tactic in the past. And I wouldn't say I was worried, because I really, I'm a fan of Luca's work and I trust him in that. But I was just a teensy bit worried at how others could perceive, having a non-white cannibal at the center of this story. Did you have any thoughts about this as well?
Yeah. Well, as I said in the film series that you've alluded to several times, I intended that all of the eaters, the monsters in my story, they are all white. And there was no way that I could ever even think about describing Marin as Taylor is and as Taylor plays her. But I think, this is, I'm not exactly sure what the timeline was, but, having seen her in Waves, I think Luca was really set on having her, because her performance in that movie is so stunning, but understated. Like she's just such a brilliant actor. And so I think, everyone was willing to, try to handle things as sensitively as possible, but it was just too good an opportunity for her to let that prevent her from doing it. Right. And I think, she wanted to work with him too. So, and I think everyone, I've gotten a lot of feedback about the film now, because so many people have been able to see it at festivals, which has been so great. And I haven't received any feedback, you know, where folks were upset about that.
Yeah, I'm glad.
And actually, and actually, to the contrary, I have a couple of readers who are young women of color who are so excited about Taylor being a young woman of color playing the lead, because they don't get to see that often enough. And hopefully that will be, that is changing, that will be changing. But they don't seem to mind that she's a sympathetic monster, that she's an anti-heroine, because she's such a strong character, and she's so emotionally complex that, and, you know, as we've been saying, like, you know, you can see yourself in aspects of her. And so for them, it's been a really, really positive experience seeing her on screen.
I'm so glad. And you were also at the premiere in Venice. How was that for you?
Oh my gosh. Excuse me. It was overwhelming in the best way, you know, because, you know, this is the room that I write in my pajamas, and then that's my life most of the time, you know. And so having to, you know, go and like pick out some outfits to wear, and get a new pair of shoes, and, you know, to be meeting some folks that I hadn't gotten to meet on set because they had already wrapped, you know. So I got to meet Mark, I got to meet Timothy, and got to spend quality time with Dave, who's become a very dear friend, and quality time with Teresa. And you know, it was just a really, really wonderful, wonderful experience. I was very, very fortunate that I was able to share in that with them, and also, you know, go back to my ancestral land. So that was fun too, because I hadn't been to Italy in 20 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I studied there in college, and then I you know, there were so many other places in the world that I hadn't been to yet. And so then, wait, it's been 20 years.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, it was wonderful.
And I'm just really curious, because I read something about your practice novel, and I think that has not been published, right? If I'm
No, thank goodness.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone should write every aspiring novelist should write a practice novel, because you're still working out how to do this thing. It's hard. It takes a long time and a lot of thought and a lot of rejigging all of the pieces in your brain and on the paper. And it takes a while, you know, as they say, you know, to become really good at something. Like, you know, Malcolm Gladwell, didn't he say it was like 10,000 hours or something like that? You know, and I would say that was accurate in my case. I'm kind of amazed that I didn't have more than one practice novel, to be honest with you.
I'm just curious, what was it about?
Oh gosh, it's so embarrassing. No, it was actually, you know what? Now that we're talking about it, I think that would have been a young adult novel. Actually, it was a novel that was narrated by twins. So the first half of the book is narrated by one twin, and the second half is narrated by the other twin. And it was it's just these kids living in New York, and, you know, being melodramatic. And I'm so glad now. I mean, I know if I queried this is so funny. If I queried my agent with that novel now, like, she would never give me the time of day, you know, which is hilarious to me. But yeah, we've both moved on.
Okay.
Yeah. So
And,
it'll not be today.
Okay. And you're working on a new novel now?
Yeah, my time travel screwball comedy. Yeah, this is the thing that is, you know, taking up the most space in my brain, and it's so joyful. I always think, I think it's important to, you know, whatever creative project you're about to take on, that you not feel entirely confident that you can pull it off, because otherwise it's not ambitious enough. And so in this case, I set out to write a gleeful novel about the end of the world. There is actually a scene that will be set, you know, during the heat death of the universe. my character has to wear a special suit, obviously. But he's grappling with his own, trying to find, a sense of amor fati, and he's really struggling with it, because he, as a time traveler, gets some pretty irrefutable information firsthand about his own untimely demise. So he's trying to make peace with that and figure out how, what the shape of his life is going to be and how he wants. I know it doesn't sound like a screwball comedy, but there will be a lot of laughs. I promise you. I'm trying to get better at comic writing. I think I'm doing okay, but this is what, the iterative, drafting process is for. Add more jokes in the next draft.
Okay, no, it sounds exciting, and I'll be glad to read it. I'm currently because so far I've only read Bones and All, but I'm currently reading Petty Magic, and I really love it so far.
I see it on your bookshelf. I'm so excited. Yeah. Oh, I hope you like it. Yeah. That is probably that's definitely my favorite of my adult novels for sure. But I'm also a little bit embarrassed to go back and reread any of my old work, because I know I would have written it differently. Because I was so young writing these books. I mean, I was, let's see, I was 23, 24 when I wrote Mary Modern. And then that book, I was like 27, 28. And, there's just things that I understand now that I didn't understand then. And, I hope it's still a good read. I hope it's a good yarn. But yeah, I'm always like, oh, read my newer work. The work that I'm still proud of.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for taking your time out of your day.
Yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me.